When did you move to Eugene?
Right around 2000. At the time I was traveling in a large motorhome. So we came here several different times before we decided to make it our central headquarters. I retired when I was 51 from the museum planning and design field. I had a consulting business for long-range planning for museums and also a design build exhibition business. So I sold that and bought a motorhome and decided to retire and began traveling around the country in 1997. Really almost as soon as we got out of town and I had time to look around me. I had been very busy for a number of years raising 2 children, getting them through college, and trying to run the firm that I was running. So we got out of town and went through a lot of the areas, particularly the rural areas, where we saw that things looked much poorer than they had looked when I was younger. It was very startling to us to come out to the West and find, particularly in Oregon, a total lack of people of color at that time. It's changing slowly, but that was quite startling to us. I had a dog, and her name is Lucy. I still have her. And she was really my primary introduction to the people who are unhoused, because we walked with her every day in Monroe Park here in Eugene. And through Lucy, we met Two Hat Terry and several other people who had been homeless, were chronic homeless, and actually became friends with them. I had begun spending about half my life down in South America in Bolivia. My partner is from Bolivia. And I really found it very uncomfortable to be in the United States. I didn't like the way things were going here. I didn't like the fact that we were involved in so many wars. I didn't like the fact that there was so much wealth and so much poverty. I didn't like the justice system and the number of people, particularly of color, that were in our jails. I felt there was absolutely nothing I could do about any of it except try to forget about it so that I wouldn't go totally insane. And so I was spending a great deal of my time in South America. But in October of 2011, something rather phenomenal happened, and that was the Occupy movement. And for the first time in many years, I felt like there might be something I could do, that this might be a place where those of us who wanted to do something and hadn't been able to figure out what to do could find that path. So it was in Occupy that I became even more aware of the huge numbers of people who are unhoused, and that it is kind of the bottom of the line of the chain of events that are the net end result of the very difficult governmental and corporate structure that we have in our country. Well, when I guess Occupy had been over for more than a year, or about a year, at the time that Sleeps started. Sleeps, again, was born out of frustration. We had been working, trying to lobby the city council to get Opportunity Village started. We weren't making much headway. The number of unhoused people was increasing. The number of shelters was diminishing. And we found so much bias out in the community, so many people that were really angry with homeless people. They would yell, "Go get a job." They didn't believe housing was a right at all. And so we started saying, you know, what would make people understand? What would develop some empathy? We need some empathy here, because this hate and prejudice is creating a situation in which homeless people are unsafe. So I just woke up one morning realizing, you know, sleep. Everybody has not had a good night's sleep, whether it's because they have an aging parent, a crying child, a toothache, no matter what it is. We've all missed a good night's sleep. And we know how destabilizing that is, how cranky we are, how difficult it is to think the next day. And so we started thinking of sleep as what we should be talking about rather than a house or about even rights. It was just a need. People understand needs. And it just came safe, legally entitled emergency places to sleep. And that's how Sleeps really came as an idea. Then, of course, many, many people saw the needs, saw that the flag that we were holding up kind of worked, And a lot of people, again, had been looking for something to do, and Sleeps provided an idea that I think other people agreed was more saleable, more understandable. What we did first is we got together a team of unhoused people, which we called our strike force, with the idea that they would go out into the community and prove that, in fact, you cannot sleep anywhere in Eugene. So the tactic was to find every kind of possible land. We went to county land, we went to city land, we went to traditional protest sites, we went to parks, we went to BLM, we went to ODOT, we went every place that we could go, because our goal was to get arrested or kicked out of every single place, because it was a move to set up a lawsuit that would follow, and we wanted that proof that you could not legally sleep anywhere in Eugene. And we created that proof, and there will eventually be the lawsuit in all likelihood. The other thing we were trying to do is raise community consciousness. So when we picked places, we picked, for instance, the Trude Kaufman House. That had been given to the city. It was given to provide services to poor senior citizens. And the city had just arbitrarily closed it 2 years before, and it had been sitting empty for 2 years. We wanted to highlight that wasted resource that should be used for the seniors who were poor. We went to the community gardens when they were sold to the credit union, because that was done without any consultation with anybody in the city. And it did away with the programs in which people who were leaving jail worked with college students, worked with teenagers from the juvenile justice system. And we had all of these people coming together, mentoring, working together, and producing a ton of organic food, which was then consumed throughout the county. And they shut this down with absolutely no discussion to put in basically a bank. So we wanted to point that out. We went to the county courthouse, we went to the federal courthouse, to traditional protest sites, and there we fought First Amendment battles and had a lot of folks go to jail and a lot of folks go to trial and have major cases pending with the federal government as I speak now. So to recap, there were two purposes. One is to show that legally there was no place to sleep, and the second was to raise community awareness. For that purpose, we had not only the strike force to go out and pitch the tents, to stay in them, pass out literature, but we also had what we call the Circle of Conscience, which was members of the faith group, members of other human rights groups, and we had a CELI and email alert system, and every time the police would approach us and start making threats about shutting us down, we would alert those folks, and we would have anywhere from 50 to 150 people come down and stand in silent vigil to witness what was going on. Well, the Cost of Opportunity Village, of course, has been all private dollars. There's not been any tax dollars used. We finally did succeed in getting a piece of public land, but all the buildings, all the operational costs are paid through fundraising, private sources, and by people, just the generous Eugene community. It was that way at Occupy as well. Whoville has been receiving firewood, propane, clothes, blankets, sleeping bags, tents, everything that they need, again, with absolutely no cost from the taxpayers. It's all coming from the churches and from individuals. It's very hard to understand. I know many times the folks that I divide folks who have all this anger and hate into several different groups. Alarmingly, one of the groups is the kids going through the different fraternity procedures at the university, and a lot of the sports folks really see the homeless as a game. They drive by, they throw bags of urine, they throw cans of beer, they throw rotten eggs. It's not unusual for them to beat a homeless person up. I don't quite understand how that happens with their young people, because most of the ones that I've been involved with from the university, the experience being around them has been really uplifting. very, very positive. But we see the police reports, we talk to the folks, we know it happens. That's one group of problems. Another is the people who feel that their business interests or their lifestyle is being threatened. And that's a very privileged perspective. The world is here for me, and my need to make X amount of dollars or to live in this degree of comfort is more important than somebody else's right, really, to survive. That's another group. We also see a lot of prejudice on people that appear visually to be on the edge themselves, to be very close to becoming homeless themselves, or you can tell that they're suffering from economic loss themselves. I think that one is easier for me to understand, much as homophobia. They say some of the people that are the most homophobic, the most hating of homosexuals, are those people whose own sexuality is of question to themselves. We fear what we are afraid of for ourselves, and we transmit that into rejection and hate. So I think it comes from a lot of different places. And in every case it's expensive in human terms and also in the dollars and cents, as we've talked about. Most folks that I've talked to generally try not to respond. Mm-hmm. When they respond, they frequently invite more aggression. So I see an awful lot of people not respond. But there's also folks who will say, if somebody else get a job, they'll say, help me find one. I tried that. So there are a lot of different takes on it. It's very hard on people. It makes people very angry on the streets to be treated in that way and to be told to do something that it's impossible for them to be able to do. And that's something that has been amazing to me within the homeless community, is I know many people that really even think about sharing their cookies or their cigarettes. They really resent someone come up bumming a cigarette from them. And in the houseless community, the level of sharing is absolutely astonishing. The willingness to take care of each other. Many of us resent having to take care of our parents, or a sister who's in trouble. These are folks taking care of total strangers, 24 hours a day. The whole idea of prejudice against them, I think about our whole mark of what's successful in the United States and in much of the world, which is he who has the most toys when he dies wins. Or that can also be translated to he who does the most damage to the earth are those people we think of as successful. And homeless people have practically a zero carbon footprint. They are not destroying the earth at the rate that the rest of us are destroying it. And so I think it's particularly ironic that they take the brunt of so much antagonism, and we let the large corporations, the folks who are very wealthy and very high consumer rates, right off the hook. And we admire them, in fact. And I think that's very, very telling about our culture. When I retired from a very successful business and really expected that I was only going on sabbatical for a year or two and that then I would start working again. And I could not believe how differently I felt after about a year of not working and not working 60-hour weeks. And the things that I began to notice, including the people around me, and started becoming more aware as we drove through all the parks and cities at the terrible destruction that is taking place. Parks that I'd gone to as a child and enjoyed, you couldn't even see the mountains because of the pollution. And I had more time to listen to the news and about the different wars that we were involved with. And I made a lot of changes in how I thought about things. I took all my stocks and sold them. I refused to be involved anymore in investments in anything that had to do with energy or the military defense system. And I remember telling my stockbroker that, and he said, no worries, I'll take care of it. I'll get you in everything that's green. And I went back a month later and he said, Jean, I can't get you in everything that's green because even the green companies have portfolios that own all of these kinds of stocks that you don't want anymore. So we got rid of our stocks. We were living, we had a home up on Nectar Way and decided to sell it since we were going to be out of the country 6 months and didn't want to let it sit empty. And have just really started thinking a lot more consciously about what we ourselves are doing instead of worrying about what somebody else is doing. What are we ourselves doing to end what I feel is the destruction of all life on the planet? I think, you know, for me, people who live in a certain time frequently don't recognize what is going on around them. I know as a kid, as a teenager, I had a very good friend who came here from Germany. And she was so astonished that her parents had allowed the Nazi situation to go on. And she felt so guilt-ridden. And she talked to her mother about it, and her mother really, at the time she said, hadn't recognized what was going on. And I know during the civil rights movement, I lived in the South in a very middle-class home. And I couldn't understand why black people wanted to eat at lunch counters in restaurants where people didn't want them. Why did they want it? I mean, we wouldn't go to a restaurant where we weren't welcome. I didn't get it at all. And I was terrified of Malcolm X. I didn't understand Martin Luther King. You know, just thought he was trying to destroy my way of life. I had a very different perspective. And now, as I look around, and of course, these are the folks I honor and respect. These are the folks who turned our country back into being more what it should be with the civil rights movement of the 60s. And I look around and I think the homeless movement today is a civil rights movement. Just as people feared blacks and didn't want them in the job economy, people now fear the people that are unhoused, and because they fear them, they think that they can treat them as lepers or as the blacks were treated back in the 60s. They can basically excommunicate them from our lives. I know the city manager right now has been talking about the fact that he will not let Whoville stay where it is because he is not going to reward protesters. First, many of the people at Whoville are not protesters. They're people seeking sanctuary. But I wanted him to go back and look at Gandhi. Gandhi broke the law. He stole salt, among other things. Rosa Parks broke the law. She stole the front seat on a bus. All of the students at the lunch counters broke the law. They were all rewarded for that. And in fact, the entire culture changed because they dared to protest. They dared to break the law. I think that's very important. These folks are breaking the law because the law is unconstitutional and because society is not giving them a chance. It's called the greater necessity. And it is their constitutional right to do that. And people don't understand that something may be illegal, but it is not unconstitutional. It is the law that they're breaking that's wrong. So that's a very important concept here today. Oh, just a wonderful thing is back in the late 1800s, to explain what's going on today, there was actually a law on the books in Chicago and in many other communities that said that if a person was ugly, deformed, disfigured, or in any way their appearance made other people feel uncomfortable, it was illegal for them to appear in public. And the fine for doing so was 50 cents an occurrence. That is so exactly like what we hear about, particularly in Kesey Square and the park blocks, is that the appearance of people with a lot of tattoos, or with their hair different, or looking dirty, or acting in a way that is not threatening, but is just different, that those people do not have the right to be in public space. And so we ticket them and get them out. That is no different. They look ugly to the shoppers. That's the Chicago ugly law.